Hi y'all, it's Mimsy here. Today we are going to tackle the slipcover for this sofa. I think I mentioned in the last video where I showed you how to turn these three individual or three-seat cushions into a long bench cushion. I mentioned that I bought these two sofas off of Facebook Marketplace for $100 a piece. I've always wanted two identical sofas in front of my fireplace, parallel in front of my fireplace. I have two sofas there now, but they're completely different styles and different fabrics, and I like it. But this is what I've been wanting for years, and I finally found this set on Facebook Marketplace. The woman that I bought them from said that they came from her mom's beach condo. They were rarely used, and she had them reupholstered in this blue floral just about 10 years ago, and the upholsterer obviously retied all the springs because all the string for the 8-way tied springs is brand new. All the jute inside of the sofas is brand new. They're in perfect condition. So I didn't have to do anything structurally to these, just put a slip cover. So today I'm going to show you how to tackle the body of this sofa and how to do a waterfall skirt on this sofa. So let's get started. Okay, so since I did two of these sofas, I already cut my fabric pieces for this whole sofa. I generally will drape my slip covers, which means I'll bring my bolt of fabric to the sofa and I will just roll out the fabric onto the piece, and then I will cut along here and cut there. I normally just drape my sofas, and the reason why I generally do that is because typically I'm doing this in someone's house. So I can't always measure the sofa before I get to their house to pin fit their slipcover. So and people don't have big cutting tables in their house, and a lot of times I'm working in somebody's living room or family room, and there's furniture all around their sofa, and I'm working in a little space around their sofa. And so there's no place to roll out a roll of fabric and cut it, measure and cut. So that's why I usually drape my sofas. However, since I'm at home and this is a very straight sofa and I have the ability to measure this and then go to my sewing table and roll the fabric and cut it, that's the way I did it. So in the way that you do that is you measure the widest part. So if you're doing the inside arm piece, you measure from the front of the inside of the arm to the very back of the sofa, the depth, and then from however you're going to do your inside arm, if you're going to go from here, the deck, all the way around to the floor again, or if you're going from the deck up to here like I did, then you measure this piece and you add 2 inches to the measurement, so you've got plenty of extra fabric in order to put your seams in comfortably. So add 2 inches to that dimension and then cut that. So that's what I've done. Because I had two sofas to do, I went ahead and cut all my pieces for both sofas all at once, because I like to be efficient and do things assembly line style, because it's just way faster if you do everything all the same task all at once. So anyway, I've already got all my pieces cut. They're folded up and I labeled them. This is the skirt and outside arm, inside arm, etc., etc. Now all we have to do is pin it and then sew it. So let's get started on pinning this. All we need for this is obviously our pieces, our scissors, a good pair of scissors with a nice sharp point. So we're going to be point cutting our relief cuts, and a whole boatload of pins. So let's do this. Okay, so I am going to talk close up to the camera like this because it started raining, and it's raining really heavily, and I don't have a lapel mic, so I'm talking close so you can hear me. All right, so the first thing that I start with is always the inside back of the sofa. So you have to decide on if you're gonna railroad your fabric or you're gonna run it like this. Now, obviously, if you have a pattern on your fabric, you cannot railroad it unless your pattern is non-directional. My fabric is non-directional. It's kind of a faux linen fabric, so I can railroad this fabric if I want to. So when I first laid it out, I thought I would do it like this and put a seam on both sides so that I could run the fabric from the outside back up here, down the inside back, down the deck, and down the front, and then I would just have to hem the skirt. I thought that would be the easiest. However, I changed my mind because if you do it this way, there are going to be seams on each side. So let me run back. So with it like this, there would be a seam here all the way down the front. And while it doesn't matter here and here because there's cushions in front of it, it would matter because there would be a seam on the skirt here. And then it would come over to here. There would be a seam here because I'm doing this separate, and then the waterfall edge. I didn't want to have a seam. So I decided to railroad it. That way my seam will be here. So I'm going to put a seam here and do the skirt separate so that the skirt is continuous all the way across the front. Okay, the other thing is that this is reverse pin fitting. I'm going to pin everything inside out. So the wrong side is up. So I'm just taking off a little bit of this bulk here so that when I pin this inside arm, I don't have so much bulk here. Okay, so now I've got to I'll cut a little bit of this off and then I'll do the relief cut. And I've got it tucked into this crease right here pretty well. So you want to make sure you do that before you take off this excess. Otherwise you're liable to cut this too short. Okay, so now we can see how that will fit into this crease a little bit better. Now this piece here, so I'm going to do my inside arm and then there's going to be this piece that goes here. In order for this to lay down nice here, I've got to put a relief cut here. So you see how that wouldn't really come down? So I'm going to snip a relief cut right on this curve. Now that will allow that to come down a little bit like that. Now we're going to relief cut this piece here so that it will attach to this and this easily. Okay, so I'm going to show you how this relief cut, why this is necessary and how this works. You see how this needs to kind of tuck in right here and it needs to flatten out over the top. Well, if we don't have a relief cut in this piece, this part's never going to lay flat. And you can't, it's hard to tell on here, you kind of need to do it to see. So I've got a little too much fabric here. I'm going to take a little bit of this off, making sure that I have my fabric tucked into there so I know for sure I'm not taking off too much. Okay, at this curve is where we need to snip into this fabric. Now we're snipping in little by little. Do it little by little until it starts to lay down flat. And I could go a little bit more, just another 1/4 of an inch there. Now this will lay flat over the top of this. And then we'll do our inside arm and there'll be a seam here. Okay, now we've got this piece laid on here so that it's nice and flat. And now I will lay out the inside arm piece and pin that on. So I've got 2 of them, one for this side and one for that side. And remember, we are reverse pin fitting, so the right side of the fabric goes in. And what I like to do is just place it there, make sure that the grain of your fabric is straight and that you've got at least 2 inches on the top, the bottom, and all the sides. Now this piece has probably got to come back a little bit further because we've got to get this all the way into the crook of the arm here. And then put a couple pins to hold it level while you pin this. Okay, now I can pin across the bottom. And now on this part, you want to have a little bit of extra fabric down here so that this can sort of tuck in. So what I do is I kind of push it into the crook of the arm here, and then I pull it back out a little bit in order to pin it. So that way that seam will tuck in a little bit here. So this corner back here gets a little bit tricky because you've got a 3-way seam happening back here. So I can take off a little bit of this. I'm putting a relief cut in here right into the corner. That way I know when I'm sewing this where this corner needs to be. And I'm going to tuck this back in there because we want to make sure we have enough fabric to be able to tuck in, kind of push back into that corner. Okay. And what I'm going to do here is okay, so I've put in quite a few pins in that corner because it's a little bit tricky, but when I go to my sewing machine, I know I'm going to sew down this pin, and here's the corner basically where these will meet up. And I've got this, a little relief cut there. So I'll sew, make sure, I'll sew right up to that cut there and then down there. Tuck that in and make sure I've got enough. Yes, I do. Okay. Put in a lot of pins, almost to where the pins are almost touching each other, because I want to make sure that it doesn't move around and shift when I take this off. And what I'm doing here is I'm just kind of feeling and making sure that my fabric is getting into that corner and then pulling it back out, kind of keeping my fingers where I was feeling so I know where to put the pin. Okay, now I'm going to tuck that back in. And remember, if you're just starting to do this on your first slipcover, if it's not perfect, it's okay, because this is all going to be covered by the back cushions. Okay, so I've got it all pinned, and I'm just making sure that the way that I have it pinned allows the fabric to lay down nice and flat. If I had some like creasing or gaping anywhere, I could take out my pins and repin this so that everything lays nice and flat. I want the arms in particular to be nice and flat across here. This is going to show. Okay, so now I've got pins here and across here. So now I can do this top track arm piece that's going to go down the front and across the top. All right, I'm going to lay it on here, right side down, making sure I have enough in the back. Down the front to meet up with the skirt, which is going to go here. Center it on there, making sure that all of the grains of our fabric are on here straight. You don't want anything going crooked one way or the other, otherwise it won't stay on properly. Okay. So now I can pin across here. Okay, so now we've got to do, this is the front of the arm, and we've got to do, we're going to run this straight down the front here, and we're going to pin it together in the front of the arm. We've got to put a relief cut right here in order so that this will fit around. Pin right to that corner. and then feel that corner and pin right to this corner, overlapping these two pins. So when I sew this, you'll be able to see this is where I make that turn, where those pins overlap. So you can get a nice tight corner there. Okay, so now I'm down to this corner here, and this is where this is going to meet with the skirt. So this part is going to be tricky, and this is going to be one, actually this is the first place that I start sewing, because you've got an intersection with, let's see, we're going to have one seam here, and then a seam here coming into this whole section with the skirt. So we need another relief clip here in order for that to open up and lay flat, and a relief clip here. Okay, so I did not continue the pins here. I will go ahead and put some pins here, tucking that in nice and tight to there, and then I'll put a pin here. Now that's as far as I'm going to go, because this part is going to be cut off, and then the skirt is going to come across here. The inside arm is pinned all the way around, all the way down the front, pinned in the crook of the sofa here. It's pinned across the top, along the top arm here, and the inside, pinned to the inside back. So now I can start with the outside arm. And the outside arm, the way I measured it, is so that this would go from the top of the arm here all the way to the floor, and I left a little extra so that I could just put a hem right in the bottom of the outside arm. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I want to make sure I've got 2 inches on the front and 2 inches on the back, and the top of the back of my sofa curves out a little bit, so you got to make sure that you leave enough to account for that. We're going to have only about 2 inches extra here, but on the bottom it'll be 4 inches because of that curve. So now I'm going to put some pins on this to hold it in place while I pin it. And of course, make sure that the grain of your fabric is parallel to the floor, you know, that your grain is straight, that you're not on a bias. And since I'm all pinned on the inside, I can kind of pull on that just ever so slightly to make sure that we're fitting snugly. You don't want it to be tight. You don't want your slipcover to pull anywhere, because if your slipcover is pulling, then it creates creases, and you want it to just be snug but not tight. Okay, we've got to put a relief snip here. As you see it's tight here, just can't get in there good. So you put a snip right into the corner, right where the corner of the sofa is. And just be very careful you don't snip it too far. Outside pin going down. And I don't have to go all the way down this, because remember the skirt is going to be attached right about here. So, okay, I'm pinned up to here, all the way back, continue back here. Okay, so nice and smooth, pinned all the way around. I'll show you how close the pins are there. The inside arm and the front of the arm, and the overlap of the pins. So this is where I'll meet in the corner and turn the corner all the way down. Inside arm, the whole center, and outside arm. Okay, I'm going to show you how this part comes together. This is the inside arm here, the top of the arm. This is the inside back, and then the back of the sofa here, which I haven't put on yet. I want to show you how this comes together. And when you go to your sewing machine to sew it, you will sew this seam here, the one that goes down to the kind of the crotch of the sofa. You'll sew this seam here all the way up to as far as you can go. Off this piece here, you'll sew this piece all the way up. Then you'll open up these seams and you will sew this seam here, because this will be sewn together, and these seams will open up and you'll sew this piece here. So I just put that relief cut in there. You see how that's the corner of the sofa? So that relief cut comes almost to there, just enough so I can sew the seam right there, and that will come right to that corner. Now I can pin that right at the corner, and I'll pin this one right up to that. Okay, so I'll show you how to do the waterfall style skirt. It's best that this seam here goes at an angle down toward that corner, because doing it a straight like this, it makes it a little bit pulls on this seam here. It's just an easier fit to have this at an angle rather than straight across. It'll lay down flatter in this area. Pin across here at an angle and then sew across there, and then this will just be folded back, and that'll create the kick pleat on this corner. Just bring your kick pleat right back to that corner there, and this will be folded back and sewn like that, and then another piece of fabric will go here, and I always just do that very last. Add that piece in and then attach it to this same seam line here. Make sure I have enough pins in this corner here, because we've got this seam coming into here, this seam going across here, and this seam here. So this is another spot where there's multiple intersections here. So what I'm going to do first, actually what I'll do is I'll do this one here into this corner, this one here to meet there, and then this one straight across all the way there. So then the very last thing that you do on your slipcover is close up the back. So we've got to put the back piece on there, then I will trim down all of the seams, and then I will take it to my sewing machine and sew the whole thing all at once. And then the last thing is putting in the hem and putting in the back piece of fabric in the kick pleat on the front. Okay, so the last thing that you have to think about is a closure. If you have a piece of a sofa or a chair or something that's completely symmetrical and totally square, then you may not need to put in a closure, a zipper or Velcro, buttons, however you decide to close up the back of your sofa. This sofa looks completely square, however, it does curve out on the corner. This one requires a zipper, and I'm going to put an invisible zipper down one of the edges. Since my sofas are going to be floating in the room, I'm going to put one on one side and one on the other so that both of them are on the same side of the sofa toward the fireplace so you don't see it. But the reason why you need to have a closure on this one is because the top of this sofa is wider because it curves out. It's wider up here than it is down here. And if I make this nice and tight around the sofa at the bottom, this would not make it over the top of this. It would rip that seam open trying to get this part over this part. So it requires a zipper. Okay, and this side I pin all the way down to the bottom of the leg because this side's just going to be closed. Now I see here that I've got kind of a, can you see how there's like a little bit of a, I just want to make sure that the whole thing hangs nice and straight. So I don't have a lot of pins here. I'm going to pull that a little bit tighter there and repin because I want the back of my sofa to hang really, really straight because both of my sofas float in the room, so you see the backs of them. One of them will have a buffet behind it or credenza, so that side won't be so critical, but I just want to make sure that the back hangs nice and straight. Once the zipper is installed, then I can bring the slipcover back out here, install it right side out the way that it's going to be, make sure that everything is sewn properly. I don't have any gapping or puckering or any creases where they shouldn't be, that everything hangs nice and straight. Then I can do all the hemming, and I will put this back on the ground in order to hem it so that I can see it right against the ground. I will pin the hem up, and I actually hand sewed the hem on the other one because I wanted to do it just so that you don't see the hem. I didn't want to see a line of hemming across there, so I did kind of a blind hem. You could do a blind hem on your sewing machine, but I just hand stitched it because it always comes out better. And then once it's all hemmed, then I put in these two pieces of fabric here to go back, cover that up, and that's it. That's how you cut and pin a sofa slipcover. If you want to see how I made the seat cushions, the 3 seat cushions, into one long bench cushion to modernize this and make it look today, you can check out that video here.